Okay, thanks everybody for tuning in. We are here in our YouTube. We couldn't make it live, but there's reasons for that. And we have our amazing guest, who's Thomas Yeomans. Is that how you say your last
Yeah,
name? Yeomans.
yeah,
Okay,
Yeomans, yeah.
great. He's a PhD. We studies in Harvard, Oxford, and the University of California. He's the founder and director of the Concord Institute and co-founder with Russian colleagues of the International School, a postgraduate training institute in St. Petersburg, Russia. Since 1970s, since 1970, he has worked as a psychotherapist, a teacher and trainer of professionals in psychosynthesis and spiritual psychology throughout North America, Europe, and Russia. He has published writings on psychosynthesis and spiritual psychology, as well as 3 volumes of poetry and a children's book. So today we are going to have this talk with Thomas about his latest book. Or is it? Holy Fire. See? Let me see. Put it over there. A wonderful cover. And amazing content. I want to congratulate you on this book because it has so much to, I had to go slowly to think, rethink, process, and then continue because there's a lot of deep stuff in this book.
Right.
So
Well,
congratulations.
yeah, just to say though, I found from the readers so far that it's best read slowly. And I encourage people now when they write, I said, don't rush. Take your time, let it sink in, let it work in you. And it's a slow read.
It is. And I'm glad
Yeah,
because
and
in
that's
that
just
way,
fine.
one can sit with it, processes, like masticate the information until one is able to get it inside. So uh, actually, how I already told you how I do my interviews. And to start with, and we'll just flow and go where see wherever it takes us. But I think that to start with, I want to ask you, from your perspective, what is the soul? What is awakening? And what is the importance, if there's any meaning, on a soul awakening for humanity?
Oh my God, what a marvelous big question, starting right off. Mon Dieu.
Well,
Dio mio.
well, I just
Yeah,
got it from your book, but in order to reach people that are either advanced, starting, in the middle, or whatever,
yeah,
I think it's important to understand your perspective,
yeah.
coming from your experience with it, so we can all be sort of in the same
Great.
train.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm starting with the soul.
Yes.
I think obviously soul is a word that's can be used in a religious context. And my choice was not to use that context, but in a sense to redefine the soul in a secular psycho-spiritual context. So it could be available to anyone, not just through a religious lens or participation. And behind that is the, I suppose, conviction that I have, or idea that I have, that the soul in a human being is that very deep central source of energy, meaning, wisdom, sense of purpose, a deep identity, knowing who we really are. In the book, I use this phrase starting with the course with Tillich, who we are and who we can become. And in a sense, the soul holds the potential of the human being. And the analogy I often use is within the acorn is the image or the potential for the fully grown oak. And in a sense, that's the soul of the acorn. And an acorn won't necessarily achieve that full expression because of droughts, fires, whatever. And of course, there are always obstacles to the process of growing and awakening. But I think it's really a powerful assumption to start from the premise that within each human being, there's this very deep resource of all these different qualities of power, of love, and there are many. It's a very complex sense of who they are in the deepest and fullest way, and so that's how I'm using soul within a secular, everyday context. The interesting thing about that is that in parlance, I don't know if it's true in Spanish, but in English, soul is used all the time within common parlance. He was a soulful person. I had to look deeply in my soul to think what was right. That music really has soul, that kind of thing. And so, in a sense, it's a popular term as well as a religious term. It's a term that people with no reference to religion or to God or whatever use to indicate what's deepest and truest in them. So I also drew on that. And it's interesting, I was talking to someone the other day, when I was working with Roberto Assagioli, he never used higher self, he used the word soul. So anyway, I chose it very consciously to bring it into the secular world within the context of psychology, make it available to anyone, everyone, in fact, who is interested, regardless of religious persuasion. Now, if somebody has a religious orientation, that experience of soul can be connected to that, but it doesn't have to. So, that's my sense of soul. And then your second question is, what is awakening? Well, if you think again about the acorn and the oak, that potential for the acorn, in the acorn for the oak, begins to unfold. And there's water and rain and animals and, nurturance and so forth. And it begins to unfold, and the sapling grows, and then hopefully, the tree gets bigger and stronger and lives longer, and it has to deal with lightning and thunder and winds and so forth and so on. So it's the same thing with a human being from this perspective, is that we have this kernel of potential, of beauty, of depth. Again, there are many, many different words for it. And that kernel is seeking expression in the world. It's seeking an unfoldment, or the term I use is awakening into the world. And in the book, I talk about Maslow and Jung and Assagioli all giving me a foretaste of that, in terms of saying that there was a natural process. And I think that this is another thing about awakening. It's built in and completely natural to the human being, that we want in a very deep way to be fully ourselves. Now you have a question, okay.
Yeah, because if it's natural, I'm thinking of humanity nowadays,
Yep.
it seems it requires some sort of maturation process, because when you mention, it says it is a very deep source, it's like, oh my God, why does it have to be so deep? Because most people are lost from that connection, from their depth.
Yeah.
And most people are hung in the idea that they are their personality, and they are what they think, they are what they feel, they are their body, and there's nothing going beyond that. And I mentioned this because I'm trying to put it in the context of what's going on in this world right now. We are in an extreme, intense era, and the quarantine has made some people question a little more. But I see so many other people are still stuck on this low vibrational stage of consciousness. And there's a huge struggle in this world right now.
Absolutely.
So
See, there's
why so deep? Why make it so hard for us?
I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, I think the word deep, as I use it, is not to make it hard, but to honor it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that we really, to conceive the human being as having that potential. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you have to look at all the blocks that develop, or the traumas that happen, Same with the oak tree. So, a bear comes along and eats the acorn. That's it. In looking at awakening, you can't just say, well, there's this deep place that unfolds naturally. The drive to unfold is there, and you can capitalize on it by how you work with people. And actually 90% of the work, though, is working on the blocks. To use a psychosynthesis term, what are the identifications? You were talking about what we eat, our personality, so forth and so on. What are the identifications that keep us from honoring and rooting in and expressing, learning how to express this deep self?
Now you mentioned.
So,
Yes,
yeah.
Go ahead. So.
Well, yeah. So just a little bit more there. And this is another thing I say in the book, that the work is to help people come into the present moment with what their experience is. So in a funny way, it doesn't make any difference that the process is blocked, because that block is what needs to be dealt with in order for the unfolding to happen. There isn't any higher place to go. It's more that how do we travel through the world with greater and greater awareness, wisdom, self-direction, so forth and so on. In other words, realizing that potential. But yes, and just to go to the big picture, humanity is stuck in, as you called, a fairly low vibration. At the same time, and actually in the pandemic and during this time, we see everywhere signs of heightening the vibration, of people breaking free because they have lost the things they were identified with. And they come into a fuller sense of who they are and what they want to do. And my sense is that we're in the middle of huge transformative change on the planet, where there will be a higher vibration, to use your word, and that people will respond. It's just painful that it's so slow, and also that there's so much pain in it. There's so much suffering.
One thing that comes to my mind as you mentioned this, and it's my concern because I've also lived it, is when you shared your experience back in the 70s, that you were part of a group of psychologists, that they were, wanting to develop this sense of spirituality and the soul and whatever. And then it turned into a sect sort of like thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And power struggles and egos and everything.
Right.
I went through something like that as well. So I was really identified with that situation.
Okay.
And my thing is about this, because or I know it served you, it served me very much to realize how our weak inner connection can help us give our power to other people and believe that they are sort of demigods or something like that. Right. Now, how can we differentiate between that energy, that I call it ego, that makes us believe things, makes us believe that we are on the right path, that we are on the right thing, or the right thought and the right spirituality or whatever?
Yeah.
How can we differentiate? Because you also mentioned, and I remember one of your articles that I mentioned in my book is when you mentioned about connecting from the soul to the lower self, and also the work that the lower self has to do to meet with the higher self, which
Right.
was amazing. So there's so much, but what are your experiences from the people that you've treated in your own life, that we can learn how to stay? And as Asajoli said, that you mentioned very much in the book, is become the souls. You have to be your soul, not just, just be your soul. So how do you know you're being your soul, or you're being this image of you believing that it's a soul, but it's not?
Right. That's a great question, Gloria. It really is. I'd be interested in, I could ask you back, but let me say something first about how did you come to make the difference? I'm saving that question for you. But, I've worked with lots of people, cult survivors. And there are two things. There are other things too, but what they have to do is to look at the subpersonalities, the identifications, and the underlying needs and trauma that led them to become so rigid and to create, in a sense, a false soul. And basically, cults prey on unconsciousness and fear, and also the offer to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. So one is to look at the traumas or the identifications that kept them from staying connected, okay? The second is to feel the pain of that underneath those identifications. Existential pain, deeper traumatic pain, so that the cult was used to buffer the pain. So they have to face the pain. The deeper pain is, say, their loneliness. Just take that as an example. Their loneliness, they need to experience that directly. When they experience that directly, they get free of the identifications. So in terms of what I say in the book, if you're working with someone spiritually, that loneliness at that moment, to experience it and really accept it, how lonely you felt as a teenager, let's say, going into one of these things, that is a step on the spiritual path. There's not much light and love about it, but there's truth in it. Mm-hmm. And so then the third step is, once you have that truth, then you can begin to ask, who am I really? What are the qualities of my soul? What do I want to give? And the thing that's so interesting is that cult survivors, once they get that straight, they go on to be very creative and mature spiritual beings. And so that's the paradox that I think you have, and I do too, and many, many other people, that sect taught me how to root in who I really was. Yeah. And I had to look at my immaturities, my dependencies, the different things that drew me to this group. And I don't think there's any other way through, but it's a way through that, we have some of this in our country now too. There's this at the national level. You basically got a cult there. Mm-hmm. And people have a real choice as to how to either get sucked into it or to take a stand. In the United States of America, it's a big choice point right now. And other countries too. So I think the authoritarian tendencies on the planet as a whole are an attempt to buffer the amount of pain that people are in, because there's so much unknown, because climate change, because all sorts of things, social and economic things are changing, diversity, whatever you want. And so there's this reaction into cult formation. On the other hand, if we can break through, we're going to get a new world. And Assagioli, I want to read just one quote, and then I want to hear the answer to your question. Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
It's okay.
Assagioli says, we seem to sense that whether we conceive it as a divine being or a cosmic energy, the spirit working upon and with all creation is shaping it into order, harmony, and beauty, uniting all beings, and this is the key, parenthesis, some willing, but the majority as yet blind and rebellious, close quote, with each other through links of love, achieving slowly and silently, but powerfully and irresistibly, the supreme synthesis. That is the process of psychosynthesis.
Now, you mentioned this point
at the global level.
Yes,
yeah.
That's why it's so interesting that you would read the poem, because I was thinking, maybe I was connected. This is like, how the unified field and the collective unconscious work. Yeah. I was thinking, as you were going to mention that you were going to read the poem. I was thinking exactly about something cosmic. I was going to ask you, and it relates to the point you just read. Okay, so if there is much more to what's happening in this world than just a personal or collective will, or whether that personal will or the collective will is connected to this transformation of age, change of era, or whatever, then do we have either to take the opportunity to grow and connect deeper, or just to let things flow? And if we're going to the sixth master edition, just let it be. If everything is going to be with climate change upside down, just let it be. How can we relate to this?
Yeah, that's a great question again. And you know, I mean, the answer for me is both.
Uh-huh.
It's both. That there is some, and maybe for different people, different things. For some people who are holding on very tight, there would need to be a letting go and letting things flow. But for other people who are, you know, not holding on tight and are too loose in structure or whatever, there would probably need to be some conscious decisions as how to do different things. And an example that I told you of the cult survivor, both elements are there. They have to let go of the tightness to feel the real pain of their loneliness. Okay. Then they need to do something about the loneliness. They need to hold that child who was lonely. They need to develop new social patterns of relationship. They need to take action. Mm-hmm. So I would answer your question as both. And then the discrimination is who needs what when. Mm-hmm. And so how do you support yourself and other people moment to moment? And again, that goes back to what I said about the soul process, is that this is a moment to moment work. It isn't moments of big breakthroughs and epiphanies and so forth. It's a moment to moment work. Now, I want to hear the answer to your question. My question to you, okay. You were in one of these groups and you came out and it taught you something. What was it
that
what
I
happened?
needed to trust in my own perceptions and my own intuition, that I didn't have to give my power away, and that I had to trust what my inner self was saying, or my soul, or my higher self, or every dream I had, because I'm very dream type person, and I had the information coming to me through dreams. So I had to honor that, and I was part of it and not part of it in many ways, because I had just come back from the US, and there was nobody I could relate to here, and I fell into this group. But I was always a little, not disrespectful, but not arrogant, but I sort of have my own things. But still, I fell into this. The people that we were around, we will only talk about this false prophet all day long. That all day long, talking about what he was teaching, about believing that he was the hand next to God of everything. And then I realized that, it was just not true. It was just not, it didn't connect with my inner self. I did learn some good lessons, I must say, but I realized how manipulative this person was. And the best thing I did was to just let go, and then process it, and I wrote a book about it, and help other people too. So it's like I just so understood the things that you shared, because I went through that too. The best thing is just to learn to focus inside, not
and in a sense, I would say learn from everything. Mm-hmm. So here's a very painful, we both had very painful, so to speak, negative experience, but there was something in our soul that we needed to learn in order to be ourselves, right? Yes. And then of course, there are many wonderful, joyful, positive experiences, and we need to learn from those too. And it's a funny thing. There was an article a long time ago. This is sort of the opposite of what we're talking about, but it's worth including, by Frank Hironi. It's called The Repression of the Sublime. And that there wasn't if you live in a materialistic, largely pragmatic culture, those sublime moments, those joyful moments, those private and spiritual moments become, sometimes people feel ashamed of them, and they keep them secret, and they think, if I tell anybody about this, they'll think I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So part of this work also is really to affirm the so-called positive qualities and energies of the soul, of who we are, as well as confront the wounds and blocks and suffering that all of us experience.
Yeah, mainly because I believe that most in the Western world, we were never taught to look inside since we were little kids. You know, everything is about the consumerism and the external world. So we probably were weak in our link to the inside. And I think this was a good thing in many ways, as well as
Yeah.
difficult in other ways.
Now,
But
you know what I wanted to tell you, I'm a dream person too.
I feel cool.
I've learned more from my dreams than really any other source
Let me tell you.
over the course of my lifetime.
Me too. I mean,
Incredibly rich.
dreams have given me so much. And I'll come to that in a little bit, but I wanted to ask you something based on one thing that happened to me when I was a little girl. Does the soul has an age, or is it ageless? My deep love.
I think it's a marvelous question.
Oh, really? Oh, God.
Yeah, your questions are so good.
I'm glad.
You know, well, you know what? I actually would say both.
Both.
Yeah, but the way I would say it is that in potential, it's ageless.
Yes.
In other words, we have available from the beginning the full extent of our wisdom and love. And you can see this in children. You see in children at birth, and then in their first few years, you can see that the soul is very, if you want to say, very close to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why birth is such a marvelous experience for people, because everybody gets to get close to their soul at the moment of birth, you know, if it's a happy birth. So yes, it's ageless.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I would say that given the personality development, given the path, given the awakenings, that some people the soul can be limited in expression, not in its essence, but in expression. So you can, and in fact, if you have a leader like we're talking about before, he or she is completely disconnected from their soul.
I'm sure.
They've been taken over by some
Power.
quite dark element. Yeah.
Fire.
So there's a whole spectrum there. So I think in essence, the soul is ageless, and there are different ages of expression that people are capable of doing. And there's some very wise, very, very wise people who are deeply connected to their soul. And there are other people who are just beginning comes in and then it disappears. And right in that little section where I talk about soul infusion, I think that's really important because it gives you a sense of discrimination. It's not like you say, okay, folks, the soul exists and you all have it, so let's celebrate. No, in fact, you get in trouble if you do that. Yeah.
You know why I ask you this? Because I just finished writing my third book, and as part of it, I was connecting to soul experiences along my life, my timeline.
Yeah.
And there was one that's always been present for me, and that's why I ask you this. I was between 5 and 7 years old. My parents took me to a classical music concert in the theater. I sat next to an old lady, okay? And when the music started, she was going like this. It's like she was so involved and so wrapped in the music. The 5-year-old wanted to laugh, but at the same time, there was a presence in me that I can recall exactly as it happened, because soul moments are very few and very deep and profound. Yeah. That presence told me, like, I didn't know how to put it in words as a 5-year-old, but that soul presence or that big presence was telling me, this is how you need to live life. This is how you need to feel the music and live life with such passion. So, you know, it stayed with me all my life, but, you know, I could not put words to it until I grew up and I tried to decipher the experience in a very, like reading your book, very gentle way of going into trying to understand what that presence that has
Yeah.
been in my life in several important moments. That presence is so powerful. It's just so I felt, it's like I'm a 5-year-old, but this presence was ageless. The same
Right.
happened when I got out of my body without me doing anything. I didn't plan on it. I just was falling asleep, and suddenly I got out of body experience. And the one I could call me was not the body, but was that energy up there. And it was
Okay.
just like a presence, an ageless presence that, I had along the way tried to understand why this has happened, and how to incorporate or integrate in my life.
Yeah.
So that's why I ask you this, because it's the presence it's powerful. I don't
Right. Oh, yeah.
just
It,
powerful.
it, yeah. It's so wonderful that you had that experience, and that's you touched not only the ageless, but the fully mature potential for you. And because when you were sitting next to the woman, the old woman, the presence was saying, "This is the way you should live your life." It wasn't saying, "Oh, just enjoy the light." It was very practical. Okay, so you had the experience of those two times. It sounds like it's happened of touching the full energy and essence of your soul. And when you had the out of body experience, just what Astor Jolie said to me, actually, same thing. He said, "No, you're not that. You're this." And you need to realize that you are this powerful, radiant essence. And yes, you have a personality, and you have sub-personalities.
So
And you have to develop the personality to serve the soul.
exactly.
That's it. Yeah.
So
And so
what
you
do you
do the
mean?
work to do that.
What do you mean by develop the personality to serve the soul? Because how do we integrate this? If we are that, but we feel little, I feel very little to that huge energy, or because it's a huge responsibility to assume it. It's a huge responsibility. So, it's sort of like it's easier to be ignorant and not pay too much attention and just live a very unaware life.
Yeah.
So how do we integrate or go about this development of the personality that you mentioned?
Yeah. Well, you've had this experience and other people do, is if you want to put it this way, the soul keeps knocking.
Yep.
Yeah. So in fact, it never goes away. We're the ones who depart from it. Okay. So if you work with someone within this context, I do it almost immediately. I find those experiences that they've had and bring them forward as the context for the work. So I'm essentially saying, this is who you are. Now let's look at your personality and your anxiety and your fear and so forth and so on. What can we do at a psychological level to heal, transform, do trauma work, disidentification, subpersonality work, so that this personality vehicle, or in the book what I call system of identification, functions more and more coherently to express this essence. So the work then is working out gradually the relationship between soul and personality, not splitting them, but seeing them as aspects of a whole life, and then wanting to gradually heal, transform, and help the personality mature. Now, luckily, the soul also, just like the acorn, the soul also knows how to do that. So as well as being this radiant essence, and it happened to you as a little girl, the soul knew what you needed to do. She said, pay attention, don't laugh. This is how you need to live your life, with passion. Very specific, right? So the beauty about the soul, it is radiant, it's transcendent and so forth, but it also is descendant and guiding us all the time. So you teach people to pay attention to and be sensitive to the guidance that they're getting from their own soul. And that sheds light on what personal work needs to be done.
So yes, because it seems that since we are so trained to be in the lower vibrations of the mind and the life, the external life, we need to do some work. It's just not going to come for free. We can have these little things, but I
Right.
have felt I have to continuously be observing myself and noticing where things are coming from and sort of raise my vibration. When I work for long periods of time, years, whatever, suddenly I react unconsciously to something that has let me know that I've done that work. But it's about doing the work. That's not going to come for free. I don't think it comes for nothing.
It doesn't come for free, no. But the payoff, if you want to put it that way, the payoff is joy. Yeah.
Yes.
Satisfaction, meaning, vitality.
Right.
In the book, I talk about the core of the soul being aliveness. And Joseph Campbell was the one who,
Mhm.
I had that realization when he was talking that, oh, that's it. It's not meaning, it's aliveness. So that as the vibration, I love your word using vibration, as the vibration matures, let's put it that way, heightens, complexifies, so forth and so on, the fruit is joy. So you get paid for it.
Right.
And I bet you've had this experience of a lot of joy in doing what you're doing, right?
Yes, because
Yeah.
I noticed that I have let go of so much baggage that it wasn't even mine to start with, and I questioned myself enough to know that the things that I learned, you know, Master Yoda was my teacher. You have to
Yeah.
unlearn what you have learned, and so just letting go of the things that um, don't feel that are valuable for the one I feel inside
Yeah.
has been a great challenge, but an amazing feeling to be able to get somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We are talking about the soul being ageless or being this presence of wisdom or this magnificent, powerful presence. What is it with soul loss or soul wound? Can there be a soul wound,
Okay.
or is it the ego that's wounded? The person.
Okay. That's a great question. It, going back, going back to the child is soul infused. In fact, there isn't much personality there. There's some characteristics and so forth, but the effect of the culture, the family hasn't really taken effect yet. So you can see, as I say, you can see the energy and the qualities of the soul of the child. And actually, it's very painful to see a child who, as he or she grows into, if you want to call it a low vibration culture or constricted culture or conflicted culture, family, peers, whatever, you'll see that soul disappear.
Yeah.
You'll see it go underground because the child is confronted with the issues of survival. And she or he looks out and says, how am I going to survive in this low vibration, this conventional, whatever it is, culture? So they, in order to survive, they will take on those characteristics that seem best for the purpose of survival. But that separates them from their soul. And you get soul loss. And that, in my diagram, I forgot what page it is, but you see this personality development line falling away from the soul line because of that. So that you could just get ordinary soul loss of personality development and the split. Now, the interesting thing is, just say a little bit more about that, is it always, there's then a tension between the personality development and the presence of the soul. There's a tension, and people feel it as yearning. So they feel something's not quite right. There's something more, so forth and so, but they don't know where to go. Say, for example, a child is in a high school and is kind of just a conventional high school. Then she goes away to college, and she gets away from the family and from where she's been, and she finds a teacher who really is a good teacher and sees her and encourages her. She will move. She will have much more soul infusion. So there's all, and that tension will be less. She'll be, those are the happiest days of my life when I was studying chemistry and you know, maybe when you went to San Francisco, it's a bit that way. You know? So, but then the other thing, so that's soul loss. And you can identify that both by seeing how it happened and also see what needs to be developed in the personality to move closer to the soul line. Okay. soul wound is part of this, but it's deeper in a certain way, because the soul wound is the experience of the people around a child. But this can happen at any time in the life cycle. It happened to me in that group, actually. Not seeing who they are, not encouraging, not supporting, not loving, but in fact, mocking, attacking, saying you can't do that, that doesn't fit, and you should be this, you should be this. So that's a wound. The other thing is a wound of doing, of what they do to develop. This is a wound of being. This is a wound to the very being of the person. And it's at another level, and it's very painful. And the way it's healed is by somebody being present to and recognizing and acknowledging and supporting who this person really is. And of course, a good therapist, I think that's what a good therapist should be doing.
Yeah.
Is where is the soul and how do I accord and affirm that, and then do the personal work so it can be more present in the world.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah, because I wanted to clarify this because I've seen some people with soul loss that seem to be completely okay, the soul loss stems from the soul wound.
Yeah, exactly. They're related. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's so hard for them to face the wounds because the pain is greater than anything that they're willing to face. So they just stay disconnected, and there's not much that can be done until the person is ready for anything like that. But it's very interesting to see this, that there are situations that, I think about the kids in Syria and all the little kids that have had to live such disastrous life, how profoundly deadening this is.
Yeah.
Why do we have to live that? I mean, as you said, if they are living that, probably the soul wanted, it has to do something with that and the changes that are probably happening beyond our own ability to understand what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important, but without making it deterministic. In other words, given the children in Lesbos, the soul will make the best use of that experience eventually as possible.
That's good.
But it isn't like, oh, they called it on themselves, or they had, in a karmic way, that was their karma. No, it's just given that awful situation that should not exist, the soul of the child will make the best possible use of it to learn.
Oh gosh.
And that'll come later. But the other thing is, on Lesbos, in the camps, I'll bet you that there's some parents, in spite of all of that, who are still able to see and nurture the child for who he or she is. And there are other children who are suffering and being completely, cut off. So in any population, in any situation, there's going to be a range of experience. And sometimes people in the midst of, the Holocaust is certainly a good example, where there were people in the camps who stayed connected. And there are even statistics that they lived longer because of that. But they were always looking out for other people and supporting, in a sense, the health of the people around them in that extreme situation.
I guess it depends on where you put your state of mind, where you put your intention and your state of mind. If you're just in the depressed state, it's gonna take you over.
Right. Right.
And it reminds me of logotherapy and how Viktor Frankl was.
Viktor Frankl, yeah.
Yeah, he developed the logotherapy by being in a concentration camp, and he survived it.
Yeah.
This vision that he had. So,
and you remember he said, "No one can separate me from my beloved." He had the image of his wife, and that image of his wife was what kept him connected to his own soul. Amazing. No one can separate me from my beloved, is what he says from death camp to existentialism.
Yes.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure this is happening on Lesbos now too.
Yeah.
And that's not to say, oh, well, we'll just let it happen. But, the soul is really resilient. Mm-hmm. Really wants to be here and expressing. So I think we can uncover that in ourselves and other people, and we can count on that. But as you said earlier, we still have to do the work. And at one point you said it's a big responsibility. Yes. It is a big responsibility. At the same time, if you're willing to take that responsibility, you get the joy, the meaning, the fruition, the
Yes,
deep satisfaction. And
that's true.
it's
Now,
wonderful.
I'm going to be very sincere about one thing that I have been feeling for the past decade or so, and it's that I feel so bad to be a human being watching how we are destroying our world. And it sometimes it feels a little helpless, so I just do what I can from my point. But when I see people hunting and enjoying the hunting of killing the animals that are going on extinction, it just, I don't know, this deep wound inside that I feel that, gosh, humanity is disgusting. And I know there's a good side. When we become the soul in the manifestation level, it will be another world. But it seems that the collective unconscious, the majority, still, I do feel the change, but we need something stronger that can really shape this new reality. Now, though the change for humanity cannot come that fast because we will learn. And so it's this is feeling, I don't know if you felt it as well of,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
good to know that.
Yeah. You know, you know, I think what you said already is going to take a long time, but still, in the meantime, we certainly can do what we can do. Help and care and whatever form it is that we feel is related. But the other thing is, I think there's something existential that we need to do with that pain. I call it soul sorrow.
Mm,
That is existential. Is, if you want to say, it's a byproduct of knowing who you are. And the illusion of when you know who you are, everything's going to be sweetness and light. No. When you know who you are, you will be able to act and have the joy and so forth, but you will also be put in touch with what I call soul sorrow. It's a collective and it's existential.
mhm.
And it's interesting in that Christ is sometimes portrayed as a man of sorrow and acquainted with grief. And to me, that says it. Not to be dolorous about it, or grim about it, but no, full human maturity needs to embrace this level of suffering. And it's clear that the people who have been the greatest leaders for change have experienced that they know that soul sorrow.
Yeah.
And they've learned to live with it without it immobilizing them. But if they try to get away from it, then you're incapacitated. You go to another level of just what you're saying, the personality and so forth. So I would say that your struggle with that is a tribute to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tribute to you and the sensitivity, spiritual sensitivity that you have. And I would suggest, for whatever it's worth, that you just learn to accept it and bear it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I know many people are feeling the same way. It's
Yeah.
like when I read in social media what people comment about us as a race, it feels like it's not just hanging in one person's.
Oh, absolutely.
It's everywhere,
Absolutely.
and I
Yeah.
think that that is also the stimuli for us to change, to do
Yeah.
something about it.
Absolutely. See, that provides the motive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, in your book, you talk about 4 phases of soul awakening.
Yeah.
Can you share with us what these 4 phases are and what they are about?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's an easy question.
Okay.
Well, think about it. If you think about human development, the first awakening, and Assagioli, I got this from Assagioli and I just build on it. He said, he talked about the second awakening, and he had this little story that he would, when he wake up from sleeping, he would then sit up in bed and meditate and affirm that he was a soul. Okay. So, but the first awakening is simply waking up and becoming conscious rather than being asleep. And in terms of in psychosynthesis, disidentification is the major means by which you teach or support the first awakening, that people begin to realize that they have these different subpersonalities, they have different aspects, they're complex, they have a soul, they have a superconscious, so forth and so on. That's waking up. Some people aren't awake in that way. They're just impulsive, reactive, and dangerous to themselves or other people, or asleep in the sense that just nothing's happening. So that's the first awakening is actually very important to teach that psychological skill of disidentification and the cultivation of the I, or the center, the fair witness, whatever the words are. Mindfulness.
More or less, at what time does this happen? I mean, I can, it's difficult to generalize, but I think that there are certain things that we can consider an average, that at what time this kind of first awakening of self-awareness you think can happen?
I think it happens in childhood and adolescence. And by the time a person is 20 or 21, if possible, they should have good perspective on their personality and some sense of what the deeper directions in their life are, say in terms of choosing a partner or a career and so forth. It's not always there. You think of adolescence as experimenting with identity so much. Well, they're working out that center. They're trying to find, what am I not? What am I not? In terms of getting that center. So that's the first awakening. Second awakening is what Assagioli talked about, and we've been talking about it, is the realization of who we are in our depths or in our essence or whatever. So you get the relationship that we've been talking a lot about between soul and personality. Okay. And that's something I think most people are working on in terms of humanity. That, if there's a bell-shaped curve, the middle of the bell-shaped curve is all these people working on that awakening. And many spiritual disciplines have supported that, and then humanistic psychology and transpersonal psychology and so forth. And it's tended to be transcendent. The thing is, there is this deeper place that you rise above the pettiness of who you are, and you find that you are this divine presence. Okay, so that's very important. That just what you happened to you, it started with you at age 5, and then it's going along. But the thing that I've added, which I think is important, and particularly now in this state of the world, is the third awakening, which is to what Assagioli called the transpersonal will, the spiritual will, and using our personal will to align with our calling, our vocation, the particular gifts that we have, and emphasize, you used the word, manifestation, soul manifestation in the world. And there are many people, particularly up here, who have done the first two and are kind of lost in terms of manifestation, because no one's saying, listen, sure, you know who you are now. And what Christ said, feed my sheep. There's work to be done. So vocation, purpose, calling, and what's happening there is the energies of the soul descend through the personality into the world. And the love or the care or the wisdom or the justice or whatever flows out to the world to better the world. Okay, that's the third awakening. And the fourth awakening, which includes all of these, is once you have a place and part in the world, then you're more capable of able to experience this. People call it many different things. Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing. Interrelatedness, that we are in fact one vastly complex energetic being that is one, and that the universe is coherent and holds this. So that's the fourth awakening. And in the end of my book, where I talk about awakening to cosmos, it's the fourth awakening. I think I call it there, I'm not sure, but it's awakening to the total interconnectedness of all life, within which we manifest, within which we are, and in which we are awake. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is that we don't leave any of those things behind. It's not a line where first awakening, second awakening, third awakening. It's more like a spiral, or it's some complex increasingly complex realization of who we are. Because the person who is deeply connected to the universe still has children and a family, or goes to work, still has a body, gets toothaches, loves people, has struggles with people, and so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Now,
does that answer your question?
yes, it does. Totally. Now, I would like to ask you, what were the most important experiences in your life that have taken you to get to this point of your soul incarnation and at the understanding of soul realization? What happened to you that you were awakened in these
Yeah.
different stages?
Well, that's a great question too. Let me think. I knew you were going to ask some question like that. You told me, so I did think a little bit about it. I think that as a child, without knowing anything, I had a feeling that there was something deeper, something beyond my life. I had a perfectly good family life, so it wasn't like I was traumatized, and my parents loved me as well as they could. But even with that, there was just a sense there's something beyond that's more, and I feel connected to it, and I yearn for it. I guess I yearn for it. The yearning for me was expressed through music. And as a teenager, I was a musician and played classical music, rock, folk, so forth and so on. And have continued to be a musician my whole life, singing. And actually in my meditation, I sing every morning. I pick up the guitar, kiss the strings, and sing. So I think the music was very important. And secondarily, poetry and art and so forth. The music, very, very close to my soul. And I learned to be a competent musician. So then I had the problem of a career, third awakening, okay? And when you read, I just had such a hard time finding out how I wanted to manifest who I was. And that was a struggle. I felt quite lost. I didn't fit in. All people were encouraging me, Tom, you can do this, you can do that, you can be a president of a university, whatever. It was terrible. I was very, very lonely, very lonely. Luckily, I met my wife, and she was a marvelous person who shared the inner life with me. And she was my first sense of that there's someone else out there. There were older people who I appreciated, but in terms of my own peers, I was quite a lonely person. And so psychosynthesis and the egg diagram, and seeing that diagram, I had an intuitive recognition. I was 30 years old. Someone told me to read this book, and I saw the diagram. I said, this is what I've been looking for. So the third awakening happened at that moment. It began to happen. And again, huge amount of unfoldment, huge amount of learning. I walked right into that sect, a few years later. But I knew what I wanted to manifest. And that led to actually a very productive period in the middle part of my life. Although very stressed, I worked terribly hard. I tended to my personality was like a driver, it was very driving myself all the time. But I did a lot of good work. Then, interestingly, in my 60s, that began to die away. And it was really, what's going on here? Here I have an institute, and I'm teaching in Russia and Europe, and I've started a school in Russia, and all this. And I began to feel that it was disappearing, that I was no longer, in a sense, interested in it. It wasn't that I couldn't do it, but something else was happening. And I write about this in the book, that I went into this period in my 60s and into my 70s as a dark night of all of this going. And it was frightening, and but I had good help. And I've come out the other side. If you want to use the awakenings, I would say that I'm in the process of the fourth awakening to intervene, to whatever, And I'm grateful, of course, for that. Mm-hmm. And yet I'm still working. and I'm still, and I still have toothaches.
It doesn't
So,
end, seems, huh?
but yeah, so I think I can see particular times, and they were usually not just a moment, they were several years, where another process began to happen. I had to let go of what I had put together in order to open to that. And in some cases, I'd say that dark night went on for at least a decade.
Yeah.
So it was slow. Yeah, it was slow.
Now,
But I'm about to turn 80 in just a week or so,
wow.
and I am as joyful as I've ever been in my life.
Oh, that's so nice. Nice to
Yeah.
hear you. Nice to hear that.
Yeah.
Now, Tom,
Yeah.
last night, I was watching Thrive On, the Foster Gamble. I don't know if you watched Thrive One, but
No.
they talk a lot about the unified field theory and science, a lot of science and quantum physics and everything. And
Yeah.
I'm watching it, and I know part of me knows that what they're saying makes a lot of sense. It's just that my rational mind, since I'm not a scientist, is unable to understand the even though they make it very easy to understand, but sacred geometry or the understanding of the vacuum or the field. I immediately, since I have a psychology background, I studied psychosynthesis with Tony in Philip.
So, no.
So I was thinking about the collective unconscious and how the field that they call the unified field is the same as the conception of the collective unconscious and many other possibilities. So thinking about, the people that are completely unaware of the inner realms or the psychological realms, how would you put it easy for them in terms of what they can start doing, giving them some tools, easy tools that they can start practicing to start their awakening process for the
Mhm.
soul?
Mhm.
What would you like to share about that?
Well, that's, I think, of course, well, the first thing to say is that the tools are only as good as their usefulness for the particular person. So you can't have a situation where you take one tool and apply it to all people. So there's an initial discrimination is given this person and where they are, what do they need? What tool? In some cases, people will need to go deeper into emotional work. Sometimes they need to develop their mind. Sometimes they need to develop their will. Sometimes they need to develop their spiritual sensitivity. Sometimes they need to look at relationships, whatever. Sometimes they have to look at their trauma history, so forth and so on. So the tools are subservient to the intuition and discrimination of the person who's trying to help them. But that's the first thing. That's why in the book I put the arenas, all the different arenas where experience is going to happen. Then if you're in that arena, you use tools that are appropriate to that arena. So, but to answer your question, I think the teaching of presence is very, very powerful. And mindfulness is basically teaching presence. And you see how mindfulness has been picked up over such a wide range, and it's everywhere. Everyone's practicing it. It's not just people in ashrams. It's a word that's is in the culture. So I would think that just to make it simpler than it really is, would begin to teach a person how to be present to their own experience. And then as a second step, and both these things would help a lot, to learn to disidentify from their experience, a particular experience they're having, and tap their own wisdom as to how to heal it or change it. Now, if you did those three things, two things, presence, disidentification, and then tapping the wisdom of the soul to begin to work on that particular piece, that would do a huge amount.
Now, about this identification, what comes to my mind is this book of the Four Agreements, I think it is. Would it be sort of like, do not take things personally? Is that this identification from what you...
I don't know the book, The Four Agreements. Tell me about it.
Well, this is based on the Toltec tradition. I don't remember the name of the author, but it'll come on time. But he talks about the four agreements, and one of them is don't take things personally, be present.
Yeah.
The other two probably I have issues with because I don't remember.
Okay,
but,
that's fine.
To help people understand this identification, would it be something like do not take things personally, or how would you define or help people understand, okay, you need to disidentify from the situation? What's that mean?
Yeah, well, the first two things you said was don't take things personally. And what was the second? Be present, right? Okay, so those two would both increase the person's capacity to be centered and to disidentify. Because don't take things personally means let go of your reactions, which pull you out of the center, okay? Then be present would be to rest in the center of your awareness, mindfulness, whatever you want to call it, okay? Then, I don't know what the next two agreements are, but if it's along the lines that we just said, it would be then tap your own wisdom to see what work needs to be done.
Yeah, Don Miguel Ruiz, I just had to look at it. Okay, so be impeccable with your word, sort of like, remember Don Juan Matus? And
Don Juan, sure, yeah.
It's the same because it's from the Toltec tradition.
Right.
So be impeccable with your word, one. Don't take anything personally, two. Don't make assumptions, which I think is also good. And the other one is always do your best. Those are the four agreements.
All right. Always do your best. That's the soul is hidden in there. Right? And don't make assumptions is don't project.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, it's clearing the field so that the wisdom and energy of the soul can be more available. So the four...
To clear the field, you need to be in the now. I mean, because I can be in the now, but connected to my personality, or is it the now, the observer?
Now is the observer, yeah.
Now is the observer.
Yeah.
So,
but you observe different aspects of your personal experience for sure, but you're not identified with them.
The observer is neutral and it doesn't identify with anything.
Right.
How can someone develop the observer?
Well, through the process of disidentification, because every time you disidentify, you move closer to that center. But then there are also exercises, and actually mindfulness or the centering prayer or any number of exercises that strengthen that center. So you can do it by letting go, or you can do it by affirming that you aren't any of these things. And that's essentially what Assagioli was saying to me. He said, you have many things, many talents, but none of them is you.
Oh, wow.
That's not you.
Oh, that I'm sure that's...
You are something deeper. And I said, oh?
Really? Really?
Yeah. But see, going back to what I said, he saw me. He saw me in a way that liberated me. It was wonderful, wonderful. And no one had done that.
He must have been an amazing presence. Oh, God.
He was. And you know, Gloria, what he was very wise and, and very well read in many different disciplines and very astute psychologically and so forth. The main thing he was joyful.
He was.
He was so joyful, and he was laughing all the time, laughing.
Really?
And
so, do you think that at deeper level, joy, inner peace, freedom, and love are one and the same?
Yes and no. Okay. They're differentiated. They come from the same source, and they're differentiations of that source. So if you want to say, I often use this metaphor of the petals of the soul. Okay, think of the soul as a flower. Use that image. The petals of the soul unfold, not all at once, but serially, And so at different qualities of the soul, at different times, people will be working on those. So love is one petal of the soul. Joy is one petal of the soul. Gratitude is one petal of the soul. Truth is one petal of the soul. Justice is one petal of the soul. Power is one petal of the soul. So you can see that all those qualities that you just named come from the same source, but they are different.
Yeah.
And some people will be called to develop some quality more than others.
Okay, now you're talking about the light side of the soul, but you
Yeah.
also mentioned in your book the soul darkness, and I would love for you to talk about the holy versus the unholy darkness, please, because you mentioned it. I think it
I'm
would
sure.
be nice in this part that we're mentioning the essence of the soul, that there's also there could be a dark side to it, and these two different.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've touched on this before. Because remember when back earlier in the interview where I was talking about the importance of bearing the pain? Okay. So that's, in a sense, that's the soul. Remember the soul sorrow? That's the dark side of the soul. And then also, they're just the experiences of grief, loneliness, anger, which are part of the livingness of the psyche.
Mhm.
And particularly in sort of transcendently oriented psychotherapies, there's a tendency, and in meditation too, there's been a tendency to rise above those and neglect them. And it's very interesting now that in most Buddhist ashrams, they have a requirement of psychotherapy.
Amazing.
So that the so-called dark emotions can be experienced as legitimate, as part of the wholeness of the human being. That's holy darkness.
Uh-huh.
So that's one step to include that. Now, unholy darkness, we've also talked about this. When you have a cult, when you have extreme negativity, you move over into, and I talk about the spiritual adversary in the book, sort of collective spiritual adversary, where the quality of the darkness changes. And it's typified by cruelty, mockery, disparagement, violence, murder. Yeah. And it's very dark, and it's treated differently. You don't integrate that. You atrophy it. You block it. And so what we were saying about these groups that people get caught in, they don't make that difference. They don't see that difference. So that's very controversial. But I have had enough experience with cults and cult survivors to think there's a valuable distinction, that there is a form of darkness that you atrophy, you block, you don't go along with. At the same time, there is holy darkness, which gives the richness and feeling of a mature soul.
That was very interesting for me when I was reading your book, and to differentiate those two. I think it is so important because in order to integrate the soul, we have to embrace the fear, the anger, the frustration, and all those feelings that are part of the human experience for whatever reason they are part of us. We live in this duality, and that has to be part of it. But also that part when you mentioned the unholy one, I see it so much. I mean, I've seen there's a very tendency in South America of these um, politicians of the socialism of the 21st century. Very dark people, very extremely dark people. And our president, not the one now, but the one before, he was part of it. And this country was basically ruined. But I saw the guy, the way he changed it, the color of his skin and his aura when he started, and as he was transformed by the devilish energies of the unholy. And he's a dark being, full of anger, full of really no principles, no morality whatsoever. And it was just very interesting to see how one can move when they I told you Yoda was my teacher. He told Luke, once you start the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. It seems, I don't know if forever, because,
Yeah,
you know, his father was redeemed, but I can see that. And it is scary at the same time that it is so clear. I don't know how people get lost.
yeah, I
Argentina
know.
is going through hell because of this. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, what's wrong with people? What's wrong with us that we, knowing that they have stolen so much, that they are evil people, we still believe, well, I don't, but many,
Yeah,
many
yeah,
people still believe in them. That they think that they are, it's a cult thing. I think it's the same as
yeah.
the cult.
It
They,
is. Yeah,
these people are gods. It's amazing.
right. Yeah, and I mean, basically, the promise of a cult is that if you give us your soul, we'll take care of you.
Exactly.
But that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen because I mean, because the person who is at that doesn't care. It doesn't care at all.
Here.
But it will use the propaganda in order to have that soul surrender.
Amazing.
And if people feel inadequate or afraid or whatever, or maligned or disenfranchised or whatever, they can make that choice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's true.
And at some point, there is an awakening. But in the meanwhile, as I said at the beginning, tremendous damage can be done.
Yes.
But what's interesting also, Gloria, is that this isn't one, this person is one and this is the other. It's a process. And you can see just what you're saying. It's interesting that you saw that. Someone begins to get power, begins to get more control and so forth, and they will actually regress, or I don't know what regress to this very dark place. Shakespeare is full of this. The Shakespeare tragedies and the history plays, Richard III, for example, is a fabulous story about how someone progresses in the direction that you're talking about.
Amazing.
But the other thing is also true, that someone can be caught in that unholy darkness and come to a realization and move the other direction. I'll give you, it was for Bush, I think, there was a legal advisor called Lee Atwater. Lee Atwater was one of the first people to really use the very violent propagandic tactics against the political opponent. He was mean, and there are other people who have been mean since, but Lee Atwater, and he got a brain tumor toward the end of his life. And the brain tumor woke him up. And before he died, he wrote a book saying, I realized that I was wrong, and this was not the way to treat people. So it's important to realize that this is not, just a stuck state. It's progressing both ways, and you can see people are making choices.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
true.
There's no reason why they can't reverse that process.
Uh-huh. That's true. Oh, now it just crossed something in my mind.
Okay.
Why holy fire? What do you mean by holy fire in your book?
Well, I was trying to, I suppose you could say I was trying to evoke an energy of vitality in the soul because of what I'd realized about the soul at core being
Fire.
energy, fire. Yeah, fire.
The sun.
So holy fire was, I think, an evocative title. And then with the subtext, the process of soul awakening, holy fire. And then I came across that dream that I start the book with, which I didn't know I had. I was just looking through my journals, and I found this dream. I said, my God, I'm going to start the whole book with this dream, because it was an experience from my dreams. We were talking about dreams, which confirms the holy fire. And other people said you should call it something else, but I had the feeling that it was evocative and powerful. And I've recently learned that Heraclitus, who was a Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, felt that the whole universe was, the basic element was fire.
Yeah. There's definitely connection between the element fire and the spirit, the soul, the spirit dimension. Totally. In every culture, they connect fire to the soul.
Yeah. So I think I'm in good company.
Yes. it was really a great book, Tom. I really want to thank you not only for the book, but your articles have been important in my process of understanding many things. So keep up doing that, writing and giving the world to whoever wants to connect all this information. Now, where can people buy your book?
Where?
Where?
Amazon. That's
Amazon.
the place. And you can get it. I'm sure you can get. There's an Amazon South America.
Well, I prefer my sister to bring it to me because this small part of the world went broke with the mail system, so we don't have mailing system anymore.
I see. Okay.
It's horrible. But
Well, so they'd
Amazon.
have to get it from the States then. People would have to get it from the States.
Yeah. Do you have it? It has to be from the States. You don't have it in Europe.
Yes, in Europe too.
In Europe too.
In
Okay.
Italy, France, England, Russia. People have got it in Russia too.
Do you have
Yeah.
it only in English, or have you translated it to other languages?
It's being translated into German right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's-
But and I hope to have it translated eventually into Russian and maybe Italian.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Piero is doing there's a conference this fall in November at the Institute, and he is presenting the book to the Italian professional community.
Nice.
And we'll see. I hope maybe we'll see what happens in terms of it being translated at some point.
Yeah. Well,
So-
it sometimes it's weird because people don't understand always the English, but I'm glad that he's doing that. He's such a gentle soul.
Maybe you could get it translated into Spanish.
Oh gosh, myself, I'm trying to get my book in English.
I know.
Maybe, but I have the person that's going to do the translation from Spanish to English, does translation from English to Spanish, and he lives in Canada. He's a good friend of mine. Maybe I can have him do it too. I don't know. We'll be in contact about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Good.
so glad, Tom. This has been such a heartwarming, really amazing talk that I
Good.
hope so many people benefit from this and really connect and feel it, because we need soul awakening so bad nowadays. So
do.
bad. We need that.
Yeah.
And I hope people can connect and understand the importance of soul awakening, even if it's the first step that they are headed into. I hope this is a very valuable conversation for anybody that comes across and watches the interview.
Oh, well, thank you. And, thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk. This is my first interview.
Really?
And I was a little nervous about it. Like, what would it be like?
Well, have
But
you
it's been
enjoyed it?
totally enjoyable.
Yeah, have you had fun? I mean, it's been a good
Oh,
talk.
yes. I've loved talking with you. And
Great.
I admire so much what you're doing and how you're working. And I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Your soul you are very happy as a soul. I can see that.
Yes, I am. I am just when I don't know if this is going to make sense, but once I feel that one connects to the mission, there is no possibility of negating yourself. I mean, you just have to do what you have to do.
Right,
And
right.
I have talked a lot about free will, and I said that free will is directly related to the level of ignorance. The more ignorant you are, the higher your free will, and the less ignorant you are, the more aware and conscious. You don't have this idea of free will. You just have to do what you have to do.
Right.
So
That's it.
yeah. So
Yeah, wonderful.
we're in this, hoping that people will connect and enjoy this dialogue as much as we have.
Good. Well, thanks so much for doing it.
I'm very glad, and I'll send you the link as soon as I have it up.
Great. Okay, I'm going to send you a very cute clip, just a short clip of my two grandchildren with the book, and it's just a very beautiful, joyful. They have the book and they're talking about it, and I'll send it to you.
How old
Well,
are
one's 6 and 3.
Oh wow! And
Yeah.
do you have like WhatsApp, or do you use WhatsApp or?
With them, no, FaceTime. I think FaceTime. I was FaceTime. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, but I have the clip, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, wonderful. I will be looking forward to that.
Okay.
And good luck with the book. I hope it reaches so many people. And
Thank you.
keep it up. We have to do
And you too. Keep it up.
Yes. Thank you, Tom. And until the next one. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.